On to our top story, the White House firing back against the New York Times report alleging that President Trump asked then FBI Director James Comey to end the investigation into former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. Some lawmakers are now bringing up the I word, impeachment, on obstruction of justice. Let's bring in Fox senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano.
Good morning. I can't wait to see you wearing those diamond earrings.
Yeah, everything I wear costs less. It costs nothing. I have no diamonds on actually, because I'm a tomboy. Judge, just walk through the legal arguments that the left is making.
Well, a lot of people are arguing, it's not just the left who have concerns, as we were talking about during the break by John McCain, that any effort to influence or impede a federal investigation constitutes obstruction of justice. I choose the words influence or impede carefully because those are the words of the statute. Now, obstruction of justice is usually comes into play where somebody destroys evidence. You know, this is a memo you don't want anybody to see, and I throw it in the fireplace. Or intimidates or bribes a witness out of telling the truth. But it can also be used for any material step that influences or impedes an investigation. Now, that would include the President of the United States. So the question is, it's a he said. Let's assume for the sake of this argument that Donald Trump said what Jim Comey says he said. Is that obstruction of justice? I don't know the answer to that. It really depends on what was in the president's mind. Obviously, his intent was to talk Comey and the FBI out of investigating Flynn and how Comey perceived it. There are two other potential crimes here which are actually easier for prosecutors to prove. One is conspiracy to obstruct justice, so an agreement between two people to impede. So if Trump went to a PR person or a lawyer saying, how can I talk to Comey? What language should I use? I want to convey the impression that he shouldn't do the prosecution, but I don't want to be too heavy-handed. That could be a conspiracy. Or attempted obstruction of justice, taking a step in furtherance of the goal of obstructing justice, like telling you what to do, and then if you don't do it, I fire you. So if you put all this stuff together, the people that really dislike Trump are looking at the Nixon model. There it was destruction of evidence. It was destruction of a tape recording. Remember the famous or infamous 18.5 minutes. That was the principal charge against him in the impeachment proceedings, which of course never got to fruition because he resigned.
But we should point out that this is allegedly notes that Comey took, which FBI agents do take, that were reported to the New York Times. If they haven't seen them.
If the memo exists and Comey, because of his training, not as an FBI agent, but as a prosecutor, was an inveterate note-taker. It's just the way a lot of lawyers operate, particularly government lawyers who have to recount conversations in which they participated. If the memo existed, and if it is credible, it would be somewhat damning to the president. But it's not the end of the world for him because, as I said, it's he said. Right. But one of the he saids, Comey's, is backed up by action on the part of the president. Get out of here. I don't like the way you're running the FBI.
But Comey, he said nothing about this, about what President Trump allegedly said to him, to apparently Andrew McCabe, the acting FBI director, who testified last week that there hasn't been any interference in the investigation. Also, not to Senator Burr, head of Senate Intelligence, not to Senator Chuck Grassley. That
he has no obligation to tell them. In fact, he doesn't have an obligation to tell anybody. But there is a DOJ regulation, not a statute, a Department of Justice regulation, saying that prosecutors or DOJ personnel, of which he is one, should report any effort to impede or influence or obstruct an investigation. So it would depend on to whom the memo was sent and whether, in fact, it was sent to them. If it's a memo to the file in his laptop, that doesn't tell anybody. But if it's a memo to ABC, D&E, and ABC, D&E are senior-ranking FBI and DOJ officials, and they got it, well, then he complied with that obligation.
Wouldn't you expect him to say something, though? Because, again, Comey comes out. If he was put in this very difficult situation, allegedly, by the president. He comes out in early March and says, I'm here for another, the rest of my term. What is it? It was going to be 6 years.
There's a lot of ifs here. I agree with you. There's a lot of questions. There are pieces to the puzzle that we don't see. So ask me this. What tool does the president have if he doesn't want somebody prosecuted?
What tool does the president have?
What tool does the president have? He has the tool of pardon. Now, that puts a lot of political heat on him, but it is a legal tool that he has to terminate the prosecution of anybody. Obviously, pardons can be given before, during, or after.
Isn't that an extreme measure, though?
Yes, yes, it is, but that's what the Constitution provides, and that's what's available to him.
And also, impeachment, we talk about this. You have to be impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors, and then it goes through the House, and then the Senate has to remove you.
But we're...
Well, yes.
I mean,
this is not going to happen. First of all, I don't think it's going to happen.
No, of course not. But
secondly, it's not going to happen overnight. High crimes and misdemeanors, the phrase is treason, bribery, or high crimes and misdemeanors. So high crimes and misdemeanors, which means a different thing today than it meant in 1791, typically means something of the level of treason or bribery. In the Nixon era, there was a consensus that obstruction of justice reached that level. In the Clinton impeachment, it was entirely different. The obstruction of justice was lying under oath in a civil deposition about personal behavior. We all remember that.
But if Comey really was outraged getting what Dagan's been saying, why 3 months later, after he's fired?
I don't know. Again, that's a piece of the puzzle we don't know the answer to. Look, Comey is not without credibility issues himself.
Exactly.
So this will be, depending on where it goes, what the memo says, is there a taped version of this, as the president intimated there might be, because this is one of those famous or infamous Donald Trump, Jim Comey alone conversations. That might shed some light on it as well.
If the New York Times story is accurate as reported, Judge, has the president done anything illegal in your judgment?
No. Can the president be prosecuted for what he said, even if he said everything the way Comey said he said it? I don't think so. I don't think that is a crime. Remember, in an impeachment proceeding, it is essentially political, not legal. So we're not talking about indicting the president, charging him and trying him for obstruction of justice. There's not enough evidence there from what I have seen. But there probably is enough to animate people who are predisposed to hate him to want to move forward on the political end of impeachment. But I don't see that going anywhere.
To our story all morning long, to throw up roadblocks in front of the agenda that the American people are counting on. That's growing the economy.
We were just talking about this earlier. The Republicans control the White House. They control the Senate. They control the House of Representatives. I wish they could govern rather than all of this.